I am now recording. Let's see, today is Friday, May 3rd, 2019. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of ITSC 2309. We have pretty well finished up the SQL. Today I'm going to step into something a little bit different. I'm going to step into the compiled procedure units, or that in addition to SQL, I can compile code just like a procedure or a function in C++ to an executable file. It's not really an executable file in that you have a file that is a program, but it stores it in the database. I have set out under the announcements, there is a zip file out there which has about, I think it's about 4 files in it that you may download at your leisure, and that is the files that I will be using. I'm starting today with one of them. The file name here is procedures.sql. Then you got procedures 1, procedures 2. And as I'm starting with the simplest procedure, what is the procedure? Oh, it would help if I'd turn on my overhead here, wouldn't it? Which I will do right now. So for those of you who are watching from online, the procedure name that I've highlighted there is Hello World. Okay. Some of you guys, somebody online, talk to me so I know I've got a live audience out there. Let's see, who have I got out there? Brad, you there? Okay, Daniel?
Yep.
Okay, that's fine. I don't, Paloma, I see you. Okay, you can mute.
Okay.
So the simplest procedure is Hello World. What does it say? It says Hello World when you execute it. Let's see, line 5 here, it says this is a little bit different than a create table, but again, creating anything should be inside of a Go block in SQL. Now this is part of the programming language that we call T for Tango, T-SQL, or transaction SQL is what it is. So T-SQL, T-SQL. The create or alter is new. I want to say it is it was introduced in 2016. If you have a version of SQL Server before 2016, you'll have to just do it normally like you did it with the table. If its name is not null, object ID is not null, drop the procedure. Create or alter is real nice because you don't have to fool with it at the beginning. It will, if it's not there, it will create it. If it is there, it will change it. Begin, print hello world, end. If I just have one line, as I do in this one, the begin end is optional, although I will almost always use it. And so it's created, and hello world now is saved in the database. And now I can execute it by saying exec hello world. Let's try it and see. I will run this code right here, execute, and it says commands completed successfully. That means that that procedure now exists. If I execute it, when I execute, I get to see hello world. Wow, isn't that just special? How much fun is that? Well, it's really important because I got the computer to say something. I wrote a program that does some output. And that's the first thing I try to do. Can I get the computer to do something? And to me, so this is a very important point. Now, what can I do with this? I can give it to you. I can make it available to you. Well, I don't have to give it to you. I just give you the right to execute it. Okay. Then I also have to make you a user of my database. So when you say use swsmith.scratchdb, scratchdb is just kind of, that's where I put stuff that I don't really care about. Then you'll be able to execute this, and you can print hello world all the time. Wow, we're just going to go wild printing hello world. But the point being that I can give it to you, and now you can execute it, but you can't see the code. Not that you couldn't figure it out. but you wouldn't be able to see the code, change the code. This is all, you couldn't change it to say print goodbye world or something like that. Okay. And finally, when I get done with it, I probably don't want it hanging around in my computer, so I can just go ahead and drop the procedure. Now it's not there anymore. So I still have the code. Okay. Here's one. I'm going to change it up a little bit. And I'm going to change it. I can execute this from within a comment, so I may as well just go ahead and leave it commented. Juana, do you have a question? Okay. This one is going to have parameters. And I'm going to say, this one says hello person, not hello world, but this one takes a parameter. It takes a person's first name and the person's last name. So, for example, if I said, I want this one to say, hello, Stephen Smith. So this one has a first name and a last name. Now these parameters can come from the database just fine, no problem. We can run a select statement, take them from the database, put them in a variable and pass them over here. And that's the nice thing, is that I could go through the database and running this thing in a loop. I haven't done that yet. Right now, all I'm doing is demonstrating the parameters. So this one says begin. It prints hello, space there, and then it prints the first name, then it puts a space, and then it prints the last name. Just like any other variable in this language, it begins with that @ sign. That's my favorite one to forget. It bugs me to death. I do not like having a special character at the beginning of variables, but hey, that's the way the language runs. That's the way it runs. Just have to remember it. So anytime there's variables. Now, let's see here. There are two ways to pass parameters. One, I can pass by position. So down here on line 30, I'm saying execute hello person, and I pass it Stephen, and I pass it Smith. This is passed by position because the first parameter is first name, the second parameter is last name, F name and L name. Now, if I change them around down here, I'm gonna, it'll end up, so let me go ahead and execute this. There, I've created it. Now, when I execute it, and it says, hello, Stephen Smith, if I were to say, in this executing line, if I were to say, hello, person, Smith, comma, Stephen, that's the way it would come out. Okay. Because the first parameter maps to the first parameter that's declared. So this is passing by position. Other languages use pass by position. C, for example, uses pass by position. It doesn't have anything else. This particular programming language, though, allows me to do it either way. I can also pass by name. And this one passes by name if I say execute, and I tell it which one is which. So in this case, I've got the parameters reversed. So the last name is going to be BLOE, and the first name is going to be Joe. So this one should print, hello, Joe Blow, even though the parameters are backwards. And it did. Had I just said Blow, comma, Joe, it would have come out that way. So you can either do pass by name or you can do pass by position. Questions? Now, so this is, what do I have to give the person that I'm giving this to, the person receiving it and wants to run my beautiful code, and it's going to get, we're going to get more complicated here pretty quickly. You have to know, well, you have to know the order or the name of the parameter. Most of the time I'll be fine telling you both. Let you pass it any way you like. Yes, Juana.
When we are talking about I'm seeing that when we need to pass information for somebody else, the website or whatever they need to do, and they are gonna require from us some specific information from the database. So
Okay.
we create those procedure with the
Mhm.
whatever they need and pass it to them, and they can execute it and get the information.
Right. That's how your database, your web people would get the information from the database. They would receive it back in output parameters from a procedure. We haven't done them yet, but we're going to do them right here in just a second. So they would need to know either, you'd probably tell them the name and the position. So I would probably give the person that was receiving my code to use it. Now, it's not a big, deep, dark secret, but I don't want to give a person too much information. If they need the information, they can get it. But I don't, your web programmer doesn't really need to know this stuff down here. They don't care. As long as it works, it works. What they care about is they need to know the name of the code. They need to know the name and type of the parameters and the order. Okay, so if they want to pass by position, they may pass by position. If they want to pass by name, they can pass by name. Okay. By the way, these are value parameters. Mr. Brock, were you the one who's talking about that? Value and reference. The other gentleman, I believe. These are passed by value. These parameters cannot be changed inside the procedure. I think we get passed by reference right now. Okay. So, questions on that one? Okay. Just very basic procedures here. It's a compiled program unit. So it is compiled, it lives in the database, and I can make it available now to other people. The idea is I want to make my procedures available, but I don't want to make my tables available. If you need information from me, I write a procedure that gives you the information you need. Okay, this one has an output parameter. I'm calling this one name test. And now we get our first output parameters come in two different flavors in programming languages. Have you ever heard them called pass by reference? Does that word mean anything to you? Pass by reference, when you pass this, this language, by the way, passes by reference. When I pass a parameter to a procedure or a subroutine, and I pass it as an output parameter, one way that I can possibly do it is instead of making a copy of it and passing in the copy, I pass the memory address. And reference is another word for a memory address. And that's what TSQL does. It passes, I'm going to pass the memory address of this parameter that I'm calling PLEN, P-length. So what I'm going to do, let's see, with this, I'm going to pass in a name, and I'm going to pass back to you how many letters are in that name. Fairly simple. I just say, go get the length, give that back to me in a parameter. Why don't you just do it yourself? I don't know. Because that wouldn't have illustrated what I'm trying to do here. Notice I have to flag that parameter is output. That will always be the case. If you're writing C code, you begin it with a ampersand. Right. Yeah, okay. So in C, you would begin with an ampersand. That would tell you that it's a two-way parameter. The other way of handling it, input, output parameters, is you can copy it in and then copy it out. Okay, that runs a little more slowly. Now, PLSQL, the Oracle's programming language, uses the copy in, copy out method. because of this, you have a parameter that when it comes to you, it doesn't have any value. And you have to assign a value to it. And so you have a write-only parameter, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But so you can have an in or an out or an in-out parameter. With TSQL, you either pass the memory address, or this one, for example, you're passing a copy of that one. This one, you're passing the memory address. Juana? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what you're doing with it. The output parameter is allowed to be changed by the procedure, and therefore when you pass the actual parameter to it, that parameter can change. Let me show you, and perhaps it will become more. Let's execute one. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. Execute. So now I have it. Okay. So I'm going to declare a variable, numchar. It's an integer. It's just a plain old variable. Okay. He exists, by the way, only inside of this Go block. So I'm declaring a variable. Now I'm executing name test. The first parameter I'm passing it is STEVEN. How many letters are in Stephen? 6. And then the second one I pass it is numchar, the integer that has no value right now. But what's going to happen is inside the procedure, the parameter with which it's paired gets changed. Therefore, that change will come back into the program. So if you were sitting on a web page and you were to execute this code, and you passed it an integer, a place to put the value, it would come back to your program, changed, and you would get the value back. So parameters can be either in only, or they can go both directions, is typical. Copy in and copy out is not used as much, and it has its own issues. I prefer either a pass by value. So pass by value, for example, this one, when I pass it the name, STEVEN, it makes a copy of that name, passes in the copy. If I change it, I don't know whether I even can or not. It doesn't make any sense to change it because it is not an output parameter. Many languages won't let you change it because they say, you're an idiot. Why are you trying to change it? It's a copy. C, for example, will let you change it just fine. Go ahead, change it, but you're only changing the copy. I suspect that TSQL will probably stop you. Say, you know, it doesn't make any sense. You're probably making a mistake if you try to change this parameter, the first parameter, which is an in-on, which is not an output parameter. Okay. This one I can change, and it will change its corresponding variable. This one, I have to say that it's output. And I think that's good because you have to say it twice. Those of you who are used to the C programming language, when you pass a parameter, by the way, these are called the actual parameters here on line 53. They're called actual parameters because those are the ones you're really passing. If you pass it anything other than a variable, it gives you an error, and you don't say output. I think it's a nice little safety feature. Hey, you're about to clobber that variable. If you have anything in it now, you might not have it when you finish. So, and then I print it. So if we execute this, I've got to remember to, I've got to execute that declaration. So it says I have 6. Notice I can also pass by name. So I can pass the length first, and then, so this one I'm pass it Hayo Silver. I'll get to see them both. The other one has 12. So the first one has 6 characters, the other one has 12. And spaces count. Silly thing about LEN, if you're working with LEN and you need to count leading spaces, it won't count leading spaces. Just remember that. And that's true in all databases. LEN chops off leading spaces. And I fought with that for a long time because there was one task I wanted to do, and I wanted to be able to count the spaces at the beginning. Well, LEN won't get them. It gets spaces. For example, Hayo space silver, it counts the space. But if I put a space before the H of Hayo, that space would not get counted. And then since I'm done with it, go ahead and instead of just taking up space in my database, I don't really care. Okay, let's see if we can do something useful with it. I'm going to create a little database here. 2 tables, related tables, pets and owners. We've seen this one before. An owner has 0 or more pets. A pet owner has to have a name and an ID. A pet has a pet ID, a pet name, and an owner. This particular database allows orphans. How do you know? By looking at it. It doesn't have a constraint that's, well, you can't see the end of it, but the end of it comes, there's the end. There's no constraint that checks that the OID is not null. So I got the primary key on line 89. That can't be null. Pet's name cannot be null. That's a constraint. And then the foreign key, but nothing is checking to see if the foreign key is null. So this will allow orphan pets. Do you want to allow orphan pets? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. So we'll go ahead and run this guy. And I have successfully created my tables. Okay. Insert owner. The purpose of this procedure, and let me roll down to it. Purpose of this procedure is, yeah. See, that should be. There. Okay, populates the table, and so creator, alter, insert owner. Insert owner takes 3 parameters. Well, what 3 parameters? It takes a parameter called owner ID, which is going to be what? That's going to be the owner ID. OID. Takes another one called OName. That's going to be the owner name. The types of the parameters on lines 105 and 106 should match the types of the data that's in the table. If it doesn't make a whole lot of sense now, does it? If this is what I'm going to try to do, I'm going to try to take something and insert it into that table. And the objective here, never get a constraint error. Okay, this is going to be one of your first your first database security. Never hit your constraints. Never hit a table constraint. I don't want to let people just sit there and throw data at my tables. I want to stop you. I'm pushing my users back. Get those grubby little users' fingers out of my tables. Okay? So I'm going to give them this procedure by which they can put data into my table. Maybe I'll give them one to delete if I want them to be able to delete. Maybe I will have a field in there called active and I'll give them one to delete, and what it'll do, it might move it to another table or something like that. I can do anything. I'm not restricted. And so finally, when they do get an error, when something goes wrong, I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to give you a red mark across your page, error, error, error. No, I'm just going to send you back a variable. And the variable is called error level. If the error level comes back as 0, everything's fine. You can count on that value being in the database. If the error level comes back as something else, look at it, look at the documentation, and figure out what happened.
Just try and make it more user-friendly.
More security. The constraints are my last layer of defense. If you get through those constraints, I'm in trouble. So I want to keep pushing you back. I want to have layers of security. This is my second layer of, this is a layer, so I've got my castle walls. But I don't want you to be able to come up to that. I want to keep you back 20 feet so I can throw rocks at you. And so I'm going to dig a moat around it. And this amounts to the moat. Okay, so you can't actually touch, you don't even know the name of the procedure, of the table. Maybe you do, but you don't need it. You don't need to know the name of it. All you need to know is this right here. You need to know the procedure name, the parameter names and the order of the parameters, and the type of the parameters. Now, a web page can jolly well just go and put stuff into, they don't, all that they need is the access to that procedure. They don't need access to the table. Okay. And the last thing I want to do is give a web server access to my table. The web servers get knocked over all the time. Why are web servers vulnerable? Because of what they are. A web server, if you come up and connect to port 80, a web server has to take that connection. This guy's not going to take a connection. The web server wants to talk to my database. Web server calls my database, and the database makes the connection. Anything goes wrong, I break that connection. Okay. And I really can. I can shut the database down if something goes wrong in here. Okay, so here we go. Usually this starts out, I usually will give, this I would give the user. What does it do? Inserts a row into the owner's table. Returns error level as these error codes, and I tell you what they are. 0 is a success. 1, if you get a 1 back in that error code, means you have a null owner ID. By the way, if you get a 1, it doesn't mean you couldn't also have a 2. But it'll come back with the first one it finds. And this is called ladder logic. Null owner name, duplicate primary key. So this one isn't going to throw an error in the database. If you try to put in a duplicate primary key, I'm going to catch it before I try to put it into the database. Let's see how I do this. Okay, so here's the code. Create or alter procedure. Well, it looks just like these up here. Hello world. As. So it's a name as. Because my parameter list is getting a little longer, I usually drop open parentheses and then list them like this. Then I tell you what happens. This is the documentation. As, begin. Set the error level to 0. If nothing changes it, it'll still be 0 when I get to the end. Well, if the owner ID is null, set the error level to 1. Now, this is an example of what we call ladder logic, L-A-D-D-E-R, ladder logic. Notice how the if works. We test the first one. If we hit an error there, we set our error level. We are done. We are not going to execute anything else. Else, do something different. But if this one hits, nothing else happens in the code. It exits. Okay. This is good quality if then else logic. I'm going to stop now and I'm going to step over to a different. Okay. If then else logic. There are two kinds of if then else statements. Have you seen this before? This type of thing. The first one is called the delimited if then else logic, token delimited, and it's for those of you who are in here, you can't see it too well. Roll it down. Oh well. Okay, first kind is called token delimited, and the others kind of be token delimited too. So this guy, it looks like this. We have an if condition. If x equals 3. If y divided by 2 is greater than 10. Something like that, that usually involves with greater than, less than, equal to, not equal to, there's 6 of them. Then, sometimes you write THEN, sometimes you don't. But here's the thing of it, I've got a begin token. Something that tells me then begin. Something that tells me to begin here. Then I have some code. This is called the consequent. If it's true, consequently, we do da 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 da. Then I have something that ends, an ending token. Else, again, a beginning code, alternative begin token, alternative code, and ending token. The then may or may not. Quite often, it's not written anymore today. The move today is to get away from it. In TSQL, we do not use THEN. In PLSQL, we do use THEN. If you got an if, then you have to have a then, so why write it? It's kind of the way we're thinking nowadays. But it may or may not be explicit. If it's there, it's there. If it's not there, it's not there. If there is exactly one line of code in either the consequent or the alternative, the begin-end token pair is usually optional. The else is always optional. C, I guess this is. C++ is token delimited. If, condition, there's a begin token, there's your end token, consequent code, there's your else. Notice the else just has one line, therefore the tokens are optional. That's real common. It's not wrong if you put them there. They're optional. And TSQL uses this style of. The other style is, I'm not sure what you call it. It's not token delimited. You just have an if condition, then, but you don't have a begin. You just code. You have 0 or more lines of code. You may or may not have an else alternative that you have to have here an end if, something that tells you to end this if then else. So you have if, end if. You don't have tokens bracketing the else code and the then code and the else code. Questions? These two, they're just two different ways of doing it. Programming languages, this first thing you got to look for is which way does it do an if? Okay, it's one of these two ways. If you have, in this style, you will almost always have an else if token. Okay, so you say if condition, then some code, else if condition, then some code. Else if condition, then some code. And let's see if I can get to the end of this thing. Well, let's see. Control 1. I'm trying to get past this thing. There we go. PLSQL uses this. The interesting thing here is you have if, else if, else if, else if, and you only have one end if that closes all of them, is the nice thing about that. So you don't have to say else if. You don't have to have end if, end if, end if, end if. It helps. We don't. They typically don't give you a then if. So if you have them on both sides, it kind of gets confusing. I personally like the token delimited better, but you know, it's a little bit like asking a mechanic, which do you like, but what color hammer do you like? I didn't know it mattered. You use the one you got. Okay. So there's two different styles. If you go to PLSQL in Oracle, you will find this style. If you're in TSQL, you use this one. Now let me go back. Notice I have if, else. I don't have a begin. This uses a begin end, but if then is understood, I only have one single line there, so the begin end are optional. If I put begin end around line 121, it would get tedious. So if the owner ID is null, that parameter, set error level to 1, that's it. We never come back into it anyplace. There's nothing down here at the end that we do. Else, if the username is null, we set the user ID to error level to 2. Now notice that I checked those things that I could check, the parameters that I could check to see if they're null. I don't have to hit the database to see if they're null. I'm going to check everything I can check without hitting the database first. Now, I have to go to the database. Look at that. I got SQL. SQL running right inside of this code. I don't have to make any kind of special connections. Now, if you are running this inside of C or Visual Basic, it's a royal pain in the neck. But here I just executed. So I'm executing SQL query. If exists, select anything from owner where the owner ID, OID, is equal to the parameter. By the way, no semicolon on this embedded stuff. Here? Okay. Well, the logic starts off, here's at the begin, so there's the begin token for the code. I set the error level to 0. Now, if nothing changes it, it's going to stay 0. So I check the OID. Is the OID null? If he's null, set him to 1, exit, we're done. Okay. Then I check the owner name. If that's null, I set him to 2, we're done. Now, if I pass both of those two, now I'm going to go into the database and look to see if the owner ID is already there. If he exists, you will see some people will select count. They will select count and say if the count is greater than 0. It's easier just to say if exists. It's easier for the database than it is to go in and count, because as soon as it finds 1, something exists. It's true. count, it has to go count everything. Okay, what do I do? Set error level to 3. Well, okay, we got past those. I'm going to do the insert now because I got it, and then return. I should never hit. I should never hit one of those constraints. When I return, if nothing has changed that error level, it comes back to me as 0. Other ways of doing that. Sure. Yeah. And not only that, I am doing it. Let me execute. Okay, I created the procedure. And let's execute him. Okay, let's insert owner. So declare an error code as integer, insert owner 1, Joe. That should go because there's nothing in there at this time. So Joe with a owner ID of 1, we should get an error code of 0. On the second run, I'm going to try to insert a null owner ID, and I should come back with an error code of 1. So I try to insert a null owner name, come back with an error code of 2. This one, I'm going to try to insert a one that's already been there. I should come back with an error code of 3. So start here. We'll go down to here, execute. And I can turn off these messages from the database, 0 rows affected, 1 row affected. Run 1, got an error code of 0, run 1, went, okay, no problem. The second one has an error code of 1, 2, and 3, so I hit them all. I never got a database error. It never gave me the red line across it. It just ran the code and told me what happened by its return value. And this is what we mean by, this is a good piece of code, albeit simple, because it executes and it comes back. A good computer program, particularly a program in SQL or TSQL, should not talk to you. I hate cute computer programs. I have a hamster. My hamster is cute. I don't need a cute computer program. Similarly, people will try, they'll get into the next class, and the first thing I'll tell you is just get, you can do print if you need to do print, but print is for diagnostic. The only reason I'm printing anything here is so I can see what's happening. If I'm sending stuff to a web page and my web user is running it, the last thing I wanted to do is print, because the web user is not going to know what the heck is going on. The web user is expecting it to set a variable and return that variable to them saying what happened. If they get a 0, they want to know that value got put into the database. If they get some other code, they want to be able to look up the documents and see what happened. So they don't think they're passing it a null, but it's coming back with a 2. That's telling you that when it gets to that procedure, the user's name, the owner's name is null when it gets there. I don't know what happened. Maybe you got variables named all kinds of things in these stuff. Notice that we're picking up other variable names now. Our parameters have variable names. Our database has variable names. We have local variables in our procedures that have names. So you have to have some kind of way of keeping these names straight. And I harp on that. You have to have some kind of a convention by which you can look at a name. And that's why I'm fussy, particularly in my, I just start off that way. I say, when you name fields, for example, owner. Well, all of my fields in the owner begin with an O. O ID, O name, O date of birth, O address. So you can just look at them and tell what they are. And in the database, I won't have any duplicates on those. Now, I will have on foreign keys. Foreign keys I allow to duplicate. Okay, insert pets is the same thing. I'm not going to go through insert pets as much. Insert pets has more fields, so we have an extra one, pet ID, pet name, OID, the foreign key. Same thing with the error level. 0 is a success, null primary key, null pet name, duplicate primary key, and then one last one, a 4, is an invalid foreign key. This one's going to be a little bit different. Here I'm demonstrating the begin end. So if, same thing, if PID is null, 1, return. Yes.
No.
Okay.
Please get the screen because that is pretty tiny.
I'm sorry.
The light in the board is tiny.
The light on the board is pretty shiny.
Sorry.
Okay. Why don't you move over somewhere? Okay. Yeah, if it's getting a reflection there, I just keep stepping on my shoelace. It's driving me nuts. Yeah, well, longer shoelaces than I need. I'm gonna stop and tie them for just a second. I'm gonna keep going here, and I won't go till. I'm not gonna go today until. By the way, this is not really part of the class ITSC 2309, is it? This really isn't SQL. This is where SQL goes next. Sure. Right. Your web form would call this procedure. So, right. And it would accept that, and then it would encrypt it and check it to make sure that you're not. A web form should never send anything directly to the database. If it does, have you ever heard the term SQL injection? Okay, SQL injection is where I send you in my name. So what is your name? What is your quest? What is your favorite color? And it sends these fields to the database server as inserts. Now, if that is not correctly done, I can write my name can be drop table owners. And what will happen is if I make it just right and I put just the right characters in there to terminate, and then he keeps on executing, that database server will execute my name as SQL. Oops.
I've heard of that's a way that some people can, I guess, like hack into stuff. Or
SQL injection is very real. This, if you use a procedure though, and you check everything. Now I'm just checking it for null. This procedure would still be vulnerable to SQL injection, because if I passed you something that had SQL in it, the owner's name, when I got down to the insertion, when I got here, what would happen if there was SQL here? And so I would try to send you a closing parentheses, a semicolon, and then some SQL in there. So your server, I talk about this a lot, the server would execute it. And that's SQL injection. I can block that by just looking for, your name can't be drop table, right? So I'm gonna look for those SQL commands. Lots of times they'll look for them at the Bastion host of the web of the site. My last institution, I practically got in a fight with them. They were blocking at the input to the college. You couldn't get anything that had SQL in it. Well, we were teaching SQL. They were blocking our textbook, right? Because the textbook's about SQL.
Well, like through their
Sure, if it came in as text and they saw those SQL words in there, they blocked it.
that's more of a safe. Sorry.
Well, yeah, it's a little too much, particularly if we're teaching SQL. And they were blocking it to the whole college, and well, they had a lot of database servers around. But database SQL injection is a big deal. Let's go through this. This one uses the begin end tokens set, and this one says return. A little bit different. Else return. If else return. Notice that this one does not set it to 0 at the beginning. So this is error level 1. We're done. Now I need to know something here. Does it really return when I say return? Not all programming languages do. Not all. I need to check and make sure that can I count on it returning, or does it keep executing? Some will keep executing. Modern ones don't. When you say return, boom, they're gone. Okay. Pet name is set to return. Else, if it exists, same thing stuff here. The last one is I have to go check owners and make sure that that owner ID is in there. Okay, set 4. If you look at that, I'm just checking the owner ID. Else, begin, insert, set the error level to 0. It works. If I need a quick break, I'm gonna number 2. This stuff in here. This one I'm working it a little bit differently. It's the same kind of code. This is insert owner 2, owner ID, owner name. This one does some returns are a little bit different. 0 is success, no error. If the return value has a factor of 2, here's your math. Primary numbers. I've got some primary numbers here. Multiply it by 2. If you come back and you have an even error code, you have a null owner ID. You might have other errors, but if the error code is even, you have a null owner ID. If the error code is a multiple of 3, you have a null owner name. So for example, if you come back with a 6, it's got a 2 and a 3 in it, that means you have a null owner ID and a null owner name. And finally, if you have a 5, that means that you have a duplicate primary key. Now this is commonly done. I can return more than one error message, and I don't have to make, I don't have to have 16 or 17 different messages. If I have like 5 different things I need to return, I can return a 2, factor of 2, factor of 3, factor of 5, factor of 7, and factor of 11. So based on that, if I give you a number, that number has exactly 1 primary factorization, exactly 1 factorization to primes as a product of exactly a unique set of primes. Okay. You'll see that done, board games are frequently done this way. If I wanted to do tic-tac-toe, I could assign each space a primary number. And so if you have an X at the 3rd one, then it will have a factor of 3. And so the other guy can't have a factor of 3 in his number. Okay, let's begin how it goes. So I have to start with 1. I've set it to 1. By the way, 1's not a primary number, a prime number. Set it to 1. If it's null, make him 2. But I keep executing. I don't leave. I'm going to keep checking. Okay, so now he's 2. If owner name is null, error level gets error level times 3. Now he's got a factor of 3. So now if he hit the first one and he hits the second one, now error level is 6. Check to see this one. Put in a factor of 5. I don't think you can have a, let's see, what is it? Well, you can't have a null owner ID on one that's already there, so you wouldn't have a 2 and a 5. You couldn't get that. But you know, if you did, you could get a 10 back. If error level is 1, well, if error level is still 1, everything's fine, you know. So I set him to 0 because I like that 0 being no errors. Insert, and we're done. And do my testing here. You can, I'll leave the testing to you. Let's see. I think I have one more. Questions? Yeah, go ahead, please.
So when you have your procedure built out, can you save it as a .SQL and then execute that .SQL file, or do you have to have it all in there together?
You would put it all in there together. You would execute it. Now, you could certainly save the .SQL file. You don't have a way in SQL Server to have a file on your disk and say, okay, execute the code that is in that file. That is something that I think they should really work on getting us. But that we don't have that. So you execute it once. Who's this online?
This is Brad.
Okay, Brad. I would, all I can really do here, let me see, I just have to execute this code right here. So this is TSQL. So I execute this, and now I'm free to save this. So if I want to drop it and then execute that again, I get my procedure back. But as far as the procedure goes, it lives in the database in compiled form. Did I answer your question?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I didn't know if you could do execute and then put in like the path where the file existed and then in the file name, or just have to put it in.
Yeah, I can do that in Oracle. So I can say execute, well, it's not execute, but start is the command. So I can say start and give you a path to an SQL file, and it will execute everything in that SQL file. I wish we had that in SQL Server. We do not.
Okay, thank you.
Write them a letter and tell them that Dr. Smith says he wants it too. What is the last? Insert pets. Okay, PID. No. Okay, I do not like this. Tell me what you think about this. Insert pets, right? I've got 1, 2, 3 possible, 3 parameters. I think there's 4 error conditions, same as the other one anyway. Let's look at how this one goes here. Begin. Well, if the primary key is null, the parameter that corresponds to the primary key, where I would put it, set error level to 1. Return. Check the pet name. If that, set it to return. See what, Mr. Brock? Does it need to be in brackets? Well, in the way that I'm writing this, which I don't think is the best way, okay, let's look at this. If the PID, the parameter that I call PID is null, I set error level to 1. Yeah, you're right. It does need to be in brackets, doesn't it? Yeah, I'm going to return here. I'm going to do a little work on this one. Yeah, they should be inside of that. It should be a begin So we should have a begin here. Yes, it should be in brackets, shouldn't it? You're correct. And then I'll do the rest of them the same way. Notice that we don't have an else on this one. So I keep on executing. I call this punch out programming. Or ejection seat programming, where when you hit an error of some kind, you just say return, and you would normally keep executing, but because you hit the return, I think of it like an ejection seat, kaboom, and you just punch out of the program. I do not like this type of program. I'm going to do a little bit more work on this, and I will I'll repost this one. This one isn't entirely correct. I was just doing this one quickly this morning. I think I was writing it on the train while I was bouncing around, and cigarette smoke blown in my face and everything else. That train can get kind of raunchy sometimes. Okay, now questions. What are we going to do with this in this class? Probably nothing much. Okay, how much more is there? A whole lot. Okay, it's a fairly deep topic. I've got functions, I've got procedures, I've got functions, I've got procedures that execute, that are tied to what you're doing in the database. So when you do something, I can execute one of these procedures. When you do something that changes data, I can cause one of these things to execute automatically. And I can cause it to execute after your data are updated or in place of what you're trying. So you give it some SQL statement, some insert, update, delete. I can say, okay, go ahead and do that, and then run this code to check it, make sure everything's right, or don't do it at all, run this code to check it. I don't like anything that causes a database error. I never want to see, if you go to my advanced class, I'm going to say we never want to see a database error happen. Right? No matter what this moron tries to put into our database, we should catch it, deal with it, and just return a value. Hey, you got an error of 3. Now deal with it. Okay, the database can't always deal with it. Database just sends them back an error. Okay. The database code, most of the time this code, most of the time it's just straight ladder logic. Most of the time it's if then else stuff. And as you sequence it, for example, if we were writing this to insert into the vendors, I'm going to have, how many fields are there in vendors? I don't know, about 12 or 13. So I'm going to have to check 12 or 13 parameters. I don't want to have any, excuse me, change my mind. Am I doing okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm about to wrap up here. Okay. Next week, I think maybe I will cover a little bit about the case statement and the roll up and the cube. I don't intend to put any of those on the final. I will have everything assigned today. So we're going to do all of the assignments. Mr. Brock, you asked me about one of the assignments, number 5, I believe, on 11. Yeah, module 11, where it talks about, one of them has the cube and the roll up. Do what now? Which one does the cube and the roll up?
It's number 11, page 8.
Okay, page 8. Oh, yeah, number 5 on them. We're not going to do that one to turn in. You may do it. If you do it. The reason I don't do those guys is they are not SQL. They're really part of this programming language. they're part of this. I can create that from SQL. So there's really no point in having it in the SQL class. I may go ahead and do it just because it's in the textbook, just to wrap us up here. Let me come up with a nice little exercise for you in programming, just for your own interest. I hope you're interested in programming. The next class is available in the fall, which is ITSE 2347, and it starts off there with the procedures. What else? Okay, talk about this semester, wrapping up this semester. I'm going to get all the assignments made with due dates. The due dates will be next Friday. Okay, will be everything due. The cutoff will be at the time of the final. Now, if you wish to look at I will have your test 2 done by the end of the day. I promise, cross my heart and hope to eat a bug. I'll have it done by the time I get home because I'll work on it on the train. It gives me a couple of hours. And so I'll have it posted. And then from there, we will, if you want to skip the final, you may. So you look at your grades. Decide if you want to skip the final. You need to have everything in by next Friday. Okay? And then it's up to you. You can skip. So I'll try to get everything graded in by then. I'll probably change my grade book then to count anything that's not in as a 0. So you do have to kind of watch that. It's not counting if you just have something that you didn't turn in. It doesn't count it as a 0. Okay. So I'll set the grade book so it gives you an accurate rendition. And then if you're happy with your grade, you don't have to take the final. Okay. Questions? So the drop dead cutoff will be the day of the final. Probably I'll make that evening. So at some point I got to cut everything off. I got to calculate grades. So that'll be the day of the final. Certainly not before the final, and it'll probably be that evening that. When the campus closes that evening. Okay. All right, in that case, we're gonna wrap up for today. I'm gonna turn off the recording.